happening in France? Why are there protests right now? Okay, last June, Macron dissolved the National Assembly, and so the French population had to vote for a new parliament. The left won the elections, but Macron appointed a right-winged prime minister. This right-winged prime minister got overturned by the parliament in December, and Macron appointed a new prime minister, a right-winged prime minister, again. This prime minister was really unpopular. I think it was historically unpopular. And he was, again, overturned by the parliament Monday, 8 September. And yesterday, Macron appointed a new right-winged prime minister. Our anger is legitimate. Our vote is being denied. Our democracy is in great danger.
Prime Minister François Bayrou lost a confidence vote in Parliament, becoming the fourth French leader to fall since President Emmanuel Macron's re-election in 2022. And the vote wasn't even close. Opposition parties from both sides united to bring him down. Why? It's all about money. Bayrou tried to push through a budget with 44 billion euros in cuts. That would have meant freezing pensions and slashing healthcare. The opposition said, no way. Here's the real problem though. France is broke. Its debt has reached nearly 114% of its GDP. Last year's deficit was almost double the EU's limit. Bayrou knew he'd likely lose, but gambled anyway, calling the confidence vote himself. Opposition leaders called it political self-sabotage, and they were right. How did we get here? Macron's snap election gamble last year backfired. His alliance lost seats, while the far-right National Rally became the biggest party. The parliament is deeply divided, so what now? Macron must appoint a fifth prime minister. He's ruled out new elections, so he'll have to find someone who can manage this broken parliament. The opposition wants Macron himself to resign. That seems unlikely, but one thing's certain, Europe's second largest economy is stuck in political paralysis with no clear way out.
France is now ungovernable. You better believe it. France is now ungovernable. The country that actually made its money from bleeding black people, the country that forced Haiti to pay 150 billion for their freedom. And one of the reasons why Haiti is still in the situation it is right now is because of France. France, the country that bled Africa, making sure that the countries that it colonized basically had to pay a colonial tax for being colonized. That country, you know, the country that one of the biggest slave traders in the world, that country has run out of money. They cannot afford to pay the pensions. They cannot afford the healthcare system. Literally, France is literally on the verge of economic collapse. And this is serious. France is in worse trouble than Greece was, except at the time the European Union was so powerful at the time. But now the European Union was weakened by Brexit. The European Union has been weakened by Trump turning against them. So now the European Union, they're just running around like headless chickens. They cannot even bail France out. France is literally on the verge of collapse.
Breaking update. France's government is on the verge of collapse and the crisis is shaking Europe to its core. The country is drowning in debt, with a staggering 3.3 trillion euro deficit that grows by nearly 5,000 euro every single second. And it's not just France, the United Kingdom is also staring down the same path. Here's the part most people don't know. For decades, 14 African nations were forced into an arrangement that sent up to 80% of their yearly revenues straight to France. That deal kept France afloat for over 50 years. But times have changed. Countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Senegal have expelled France, cutting off Paris from the very resources that kept its economy stable. Now, the fallout is massive. Companies are leaving France, unemployment is rising, and the state can't keep up with the weight of its own debt. The lifeline from Africa is gone, and with it, France's economic safety net.
The economic reasons why it's fallen. On his way out, the ousted Prime Minister, Mr. Francois, said, "You might kick me out, you might remove me, but that does not change the economic problems for the country." I'm paraphrasing. The real reason why France has failed as a government is because Africa has taken its power back. Ever since the country of Niger in the Sahel in Central West Africa decided to nationalize its uranium, France has never been the same again. This uranium that state-owned companies like Orano, French-owned companies like Orano had been siphoning, stealing under the previous government, today, Niger turned off the faucet. Niger said no more. So Niger, under the new governance of President Tiani, is nationalizing its uranium. This uranium France was stealing not only to light its beautiful cities like Paris and Nice, it was also using it to run its electrical manufacturing and industries. All of these are processing and running their nuclear reactors on top of it all. So these things that are the foundations of an economy, like manufacturing and processing, right now that the electricity in France, their energy is not safe. They do not have a reliable place to get their energy from. This is why they're suffering.
Here's why it's a big deal, not just for France, but for Europe, Ukraine, and even the United States. The Prime Minister's austerity plan blew up, billions in spending cuts, eliminating public holidays, and both the far left and far right united to kick him out. It's the third government collapse in 1 year. So that's pure instability. So for Europe and European Union, France is the EU's second largest economy and a nuclear power. Political chaos in Paris makes it harder to enforce budget rules, harder to lead on defense, and easier for populists like Marine Le Pen to rise. This isn't just domestic turmoil. It's a crack at the core of the European project. For Ukraine, France has been a major weapons supplier. Long-range missiles, artillery, air defense. A caretaker government means no bold moves for a while. That could slow down support just when Ukraine needs it the most. And if Le Pen's pro-Russia's blog gains more power, Kyiv loses a critical ally. For the world and the US, markets are already spooked. French debt is ballooning past 3.3 trillion. Rising borrowing costs hit the Eurozone, which drags on the global economy. And politically, Washington just lost one of its most reliable European partners at a time when Trump is telling Europe to pay up for its own defense. Here's the bigger picture. Every collapse, every delay in weapons, every protest against artillery sends a signal to Moscow and Beijing. The West is divided, and time is on their side. This isn't just French chaos. It's a stress test for democracy itself in general, in Europe, in America, in the world, everywhere. And if we're not going to pass it. But what do you think?
After several African nations kicked France out of their countries, France is falling apart. Now, you probably remember in the past couple of years, many African countries have been kicking the French out of their countries. Now, this included countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And things haven't been going well for the French economy ever since. Just last week, the French Prime Minister resigned because he just couldn't fix the economy. So how did we get here? Well, let's dive in. Now, in the late 1900s, many European countries started to leave Africa after they had controlled and colonized it for a couple of hundreds of years. But not France. France left, but only in name. In reality, France was still running things and they still kept control of all of these West African countries. France still controlled 14 countries in Africa. Now, so what France was doing here was that they signed agreements with governments of these countries, either through bribery or through negotiation without actually exposing the downsides of the agreement. So negotiating in bad faith. So this agreement said that these countries needed to keep most of their reserves in the French currency and it needs to be kept in France. And also, now the central bank that ran the currencies of all of these countries had a French representative who had a veto power. Now this means that these countries couldn't make decisions of their own long-term investments because France will always have the veto power to say, no, I don't think you should do that. Now, this includes investments inside their own country. So if they wanted to build a road, they wanted to build schools, they couldn't just access their reserves because their reserves, more than half of them, 65%, were kept in France. Now, when the France defend themselves, they said that this benefited these countries because their currencies didn't fluctuate because their currencies were linked to the franc. But this also meant that if things are going bad in France, the currencies of these countries also lose value, which meant that any bad decision that France does will definitely have huge consequences on the currencies and the economies of these countries. So in a nutshell, these countries were propping up the French economy. Now, on top of that, France was also taking a large amount of resources. So 30% of France's uranium that it used to produce electricity was mined in Niger, but more than 90% of the people in Niger didn't even have electricity. Now, there were also mining companies that were coming from France, digging up the gold and buying it at a very cheap amount because remember, they maintained their control of the value of the currency between the franc and those countries' currencies. And then they will take them and then sell them at a higher price to the rest of the world. Now, starting about 5 to 6 years ago, there started to be a resistance in these countries. That's when military coups came in. That's when we saw the rise of people like Ibrahim Traore and other leaders around the region. Now, these leaders, when they came in, they cancelled most of these contracts. But on top of that, they removed that veto power that allowed France to veto anything that these countries wanted to do economically. Now, this came with a huge burden on the French economy. So starting from 2022, when they started to see that the show is about to end, they started to put in measures to try to prop up their own economy. Now, the other problem they have is that most Western countries, including those in Europe, those in Asia, like Japan, South Korea, and also the United States, they have an aging population. And the process here is that when it's your time to retire, the money will be taken from those who are going to be working at that time, and it should be used to pay you off when you retire and cash out. But the problem in many Western countries is that many people are about to retire, but there's no people who are going to come in and replace them. That's why those countries had to seek out workers from Asia and Africa. That's why you saw a lot of people who migrated overseas to go there and work, including me. It's because they're trying to replace aging population. So France has the same problem. So what they did is that the first step that they did, I think it was 2022 or 2023, they came out and they said that they're going to rise the age of retirement. So instead of retiring at 60, they increased it to retiring at 62. That means that they have delayed the amount of time that they need to cash out those people who are retiring. And also, they're adding 2 more years to those people who are working to add more value into the economy and contribute. They also increased it from that to 64, but that will only be implemented, I think, in 2030. So as you can see, they're trying to solve the problems, but that wasn't enough. France also have a very huge deficit. This means that the amount of money that they are collecting from tax is less than the amount that they are spending in the public spending, things like schools, roads, administration, and all of those other things that the governments need to do. So what do? They borrow. And now France also has the highest borrowing in Europe. So they've been borrowing a large amount of money and it's becoming very difficult now to pay back that money back. On top of that, because of all of these problems, France's credit rating has lowered, which means that now whenever they go to borrow, they're going to have to pay even more money. So what they did is they came with a plan. The plan included removing 2 holidays. They are saying that we have 2 holidays, we need to remove them. People need to be working on those holidays. That will produce more money for the economy and we can use it to reduce the amount of debt. People were having none of that. Now, on top of that, they're saying that they're going to cut public spending. The money that is being spent on welfare, the money that is paid to people who are like old or people who are unable to work for themselves, they want to cut that. And people are not happy about it. So they came out. So the Prime Minister went to Parliament and said, guys, this is the plan. This is how we're going to do it. Who is agreeing with me? Who's not agreeing with me? And then he challenged them to a vote of no confidence in which he lost and then he was removed. So that's how bad things are in France right now. The economy is not doing well. They don't have a way out. People are angry. People are resisting. But something has to be done. It's either you need to cut on the spending or you need to increase tax or you need to work more. It's one of those. There's no other way.
Guys, look at this. Earlier this year, Ibrahim Traore, he had a response to Emmanuel Macron's dismissive comments on Africa. This exchange now has gone full circle with all the protests going on in France. Listen.
He also insulted all Africans.
I think they forgot to say thank you to us. It's not a big deal. It will come with time.
There is a part that caught my attention where he talked about ingratitude.
Ingratitude, I am well aware, is a non-transmissible disease to humans.
He is human. Our ingratitude is not transmissible to him. This is how this gentleman sees Africa, sees Africans. We are not human in his eyes. I think that if he is not an atheist and he prays, every morning when he wakes up and prays, he should also pray to the Africans. Because it is thanks to our ancestors that there is a France today. He should pray to us.
Macron said that Africans should be grateful, but Ibrahim Traoré said it's actually the other way around. With all the protests going on in France, do you guys think that Ibrahim Traoré's words have gone full circle? Because without free access to Africa's resources, France is on a free fall, and many of the French people, they're angry at Macron. Let me know what you guys think. Comment below.
I'm 100% certain that there are some CIA agents somewhere that are foaming at the mouth waiting to take this guy out, and I need all Americans to pay attention to Burkina Faso so that the US is not able to do to them what we did to Iran. If this is the first time that you're hearing of this guy, this is President Traoré of Burkina Faso, and he's been president for about 2 years now. Since becoming president, he has kicked out any sort of French colonial influence, so there's no French military allowed, no French media allowed. All of their colonial oppressors have been kicked out of the country. He denied loans from the IMF and the World Bank, which were very predatory and are designed essentially to keep these low-income countries in debt traps so that they're able to be controlled. And he basically was just like, no, we're not going to do that. He denied those international bank loans, and he also paid off all the local debts. He then proceeded to nationalize all of Burkina Faso's natural resources. So now the people own their own natural resources, and these other countries and huge corporations aren't able to go and extract them in this like very neo-colonialistic way. And he used the profits from that to reinvest back in the Burkinabe people. He invested in new roads, good infrastructure, affordable public housing. He created more tomato and cotton processing plants. He nationalized their gold supply, so now other countries can't like extort their gold from them. He created a treasury deposit bank to expand access to rural credit. He reduced the salaries of politicians by 30% so that he could raise the salaries of public servants by 50%. And in only 2 years, he raised Burkina Faso's GDP from 18.1 billion to 22.2 billion. Now, if you live in the West and you just Google this guy, you will find a lot of critical articles of people, media outlets specifically in the West, that are trying to paint him as a bad guy or trying to paint him as this radical that's like taking over Burkina Faso, and they're trying to give him a negative image. Whereas if you read news articles from African news sources or talk to people in Burkina Faso, they all love him. And the reason Americans need to pay attention is because back whenever Iran tried to nationalize their oil supply and say, no, we're not going to let these Western powers just extract our oil and not give us like any cut of it, we're going to like take control of our own resources, we overthrew their democratically elected like leadership. Like the US and England like staged this like overthrow of the government. It's called Project Ajax, you can look it up, basically to implement like a puppet government to be able to control them, and that's kind of like the root of a lot of the West's tensions with Iran. And right now Traoré is essentially nationalizing their natural resources in Africa, because Africa is full of natural resources, and the West knows that, which is why they try and colonize them and control them and give them these predatory loans through the World Bank and the IMF. So not only is this guy just like a danger to like Western colonialism because they're no longer able to exploit Burkina Faso so long as this guy's in power, but also other African leaders are looking at him and saying like, wait a minute, like this guy's onto something. And if all of Africa kind of like catches on to what this guy's doing and they do the same thing, then that is a major threat to American and European colonialism.
Is it true most of France's financial wealth right now is still built on
$500 billion a year?
Wow.
From Africa?
From Africa.
Wow.
500. That's a lot of money.
And is it true that the deals are such that an African nation that has this deal with France cannot do business around the world with their natural resources without the first right of refusal with France?
First right of refusal is in
and they
France's
can still
hand.
tell them no?
Mm-hmm. They can still tell them no.
So if they've dug gold, coffee, cocoa, whatever, they go to France like, hey, you guys want this? And they say, nah. And they say, okay, we're going to sell it over here. France can still say, nah, you can't do that.
So insane.
And all those nations still run on the French franc, which is also hilarious because even France has
goes
the
on
euro.
the euro.
Exactly.
So wait, they buy money from France with their own natural resources.
Yeah, and if they don't
that's
comply,
not even worth anything in France.
Yep, and if they don't comply, the faucet's turned off immediately.
So France's government just fell, and it's about to hit your wallet. France's parliament just killed their government again. That's 2 governments down in 1 year. We're talking about a country that owes more money than it can handle, and now has no leadership to deal with it. France's borrowing costs are shooting up because investors don't trust them to pay the bills. When governments can't borrow cheaply, their entire economy suffers. And France isn't alone. Most of Europe's big economies have serious debt problems right now. Now here's where it hits us. When France's borrowing costs go up, it pushes up the cost across Europe, including for UK businesses trying to operate there. Remember, we still make massive trades with Europe despite Brexit, and political chaos makes everything more expensive and unpredictable. But here's the kicker. Brexit already damaged our economy, so we're vulnerable to European instability because we lost a seat at the table but kept all the economic connections. But it's not just economics. There's a massive gap between European politicians and the people right now. The same anti-establishment anger that we're seeing everywhere when major democracies can't govern. It encourages political chaos everywhere else. President Macron is basically out of options. He can't call new elections, can't find a government that works. That's terrifying when you're talking about a major economy right next door. Political instability is contagious. When your biggest neighbours can't govern themselves, don't expect it to stay contained. The key insight here is that France's collapse stems from deeper structural issues, debt crisis, political disconnection and government failures.
If there is one event in human history that always disturbs me, it is the scramble for Africa and the Berlin Conference. This is where all the European powers of the 1880s decided that they were going to get together and decide how they were going to break up Africa, and didn't even invite any fucking African leaders. That has led to years of exploitation and abuse of African countries and African people by Europeans. And we can attribute current human rights crises in Africa, like in the Congo, to the scramble for Africa. And what we're seeing in France right now is those chickens coming to roost. We're seeing that Europe is nothing but a beautiful museum that doesn't produce anything and has been resting on its colonial exploitation for the last 100 years. And France is just the first domino to fall. Very soon we will see the fall of the UK, we will see the fall of Germany, because all these countries are resting on mountains of debt. And if they don't continue to exploit other countries, they will not be able to fulfill those debts.
The saga continues. France's downfall does not need to be studied because it's as easy as ABC. They are broke. They have fired their third prime minister within 1 year. Look at this photo. No matter how many prime ministers you fire, you will not be able to dig yourself out of this because you're poor, you're broke.
The funny part about the French government collapsing is not that Macron is absolute crap at picking prime ministers, but that this decision to pick this prime minister has led to apparently now government officials calling for his impeachment or resignation. The French government just had a vote of confidence over the recently added prime minister. His last name is Bayrou, I think. And out of 558 votes, they needed 280 in a yes to solidify his position. 194 said yes. 364 said no. It wasn't even close. How bad of a politician do you have to be to have picked 4 different prime ministers and lost all 4 of them in 12 months, while also being simultaneously responsible for 2 government collapses now in less than a year? That's crazy. Now it makes sense why that letter was leaked from the Ministry of Health to the hospitals in France that they should be preparing for war in early 2026.